Well, let's see what kind of delusions we can find today. Oh, here's one. Here's a guy who calls himself the New Moors. So you know we have an issue already. But in this installment of his new site that only has 127 subscribers, this offering is titled Plato Says the Greeks Were Black. Grab a popcorn, something to drink, and let's enjoy.
The ancient Greeks left black people some of the greatest historical records exposing the true origin of black people. However, because the Greeks are presumably a white race, or at least as modern day academia would have us believe, black people never gave the Greek voice a fighting chance to enlighten them. But what if I told you the Greeks were in fact black?
What if I told you they have Greek artwork which shows 3 different colors and none of it is depicting black people whatsoever? In fact, the ancient Greeks were part of what's known as Aryans. So I would say of the farthest from it. Let's continue.
Ludicrous, right? Well, this isn't ludicrous at all. According to the ancient Egyptians of Kemet and the Greeks themselves. However, many scholars have hidden these facts to maintain their reputation and their beloved system of white supremacy.
Oh, here we go. This is supposed to rile you up if you're black and try to get some belief in some crap. I mean, there's a guy that looks like he's in KKK, and there's another one that's got a Red Cross badge. What's that? But a Confederate flag that's got to be bad, and it's all white supremacy junk. Yeah, you gotta throw that in there because they are the heralds of mankind and civilization of the world, and are the spaceman. And due to jealousy and all kinds of things, we end up having these type of issues. A minute ago, whenever it tried to say white supremacy, he was basically showing some people in a fez.
However, many scholars have hidden these facts.
And so this is the Shriners. I believe later he's going to try to say something about the Masons too. You know, if you're just not inclusive enough nowadays, it's got to be white supremacy.
To maintain their reputation and their beloved system of white supremacy through institutional racism. Though the honorable and well-venerated scholar Frank M. Snowden Jr. has proven the Greeks were black, his works have gone unnoticed as his position does not ameliorate the system of white supremacy.
Again, we're on the Shriners, but I think this man's work went unnoticed because it was laughed off as being Afrocentric and this jealous thing with inferiority complex, and it all adds up together to being people trying to claim, black people trying to basically claim anybody but themselves. And it's become real self-evident, and here lately with the Black Cleopatra, where they tried to play off the Egyptians, of course, as being Bantu. But then Cleopatra somehow, too, it shows you the depth of what they'll do, especially whenever you know that they labeled it as a documentary. But then also the whole series was supposed to give empowerment to black people, to talk about sub-Saharan queens, so they know something about their heritage. This was the guise that they wove it into, and second one out the gate, poof, we was Egyptians, we was even Cleopatra. But if you think that's the extent of it, it's not. Hopefully whenever you see this, if you've seen my recent works, I've also showed, just because it's here, people, that no, they claimed they were the ancient Moors. They claimed that they were somehow the Amerindians. They were the Olmecs. They were the Vikings. They were Shakespeare. They were King James. They were everybody except for themselves.
Concerning these matters, of the Greeks' accounts, your ancient ancestors gave this story to the Egyptians of Kemet, knowing they would in later years give it to the Greeks, where it would be safely preserved until this history came back to you.
Now he's trying to tell far west sub-Saharan Bantus that didn't know Egypt existed, that they passed it on somehow to the ancient Caucasian Egyptians of Kemet, although they aren't speaking a language anything like that, and even Nubians, Nilotic is not even near Bantu languages. They couldn't, well, they're not related, but they couldn't have a conversation either. But the Nahasu language of the Nubians was deemed as being gibberish. But somehow he's going to tell you that's how it all got passed down. And this is that cargo cult mentality where you're trying to claim that the reason these people were smart was because of your ancestors, but because you can't claim or actually stand the reality of the fact that you're recent primitives, and therefore you've made up this idea that somehow white people stole this information from you, but that's okay, you're going to get it back one day, right? Whenever you're finally woke, which is admitting that you've been asleep this whole time. Let's get into this.
If the Egyptians kept this story, it would have been destroyed and hidden, but due to the successful cover-up of Greece's origin by institutional racism, the need to hide such is irrelevant.
So now we're going to pick out the Masons. So they apparently don't like the secret societies because they pin that to the KKK kind of. If you'll look at the origins and the reality of KKK, things flop in your face too. But they've got to have something to whine about, and this guy seems to have already been one of those guys that think he's so cool. What he does is he puts 3 or 4 buzzwords along with 3 or 4 pictures up, and bang, he's got blacks hooked like hell. This has got 2.3 thousand views, but he only has 127 subscribers, which is kind of indicating that they like watching it a lot, but they're not going to subscribe to this crap. His symbol over here is a green black power hand, kind of like from the Olympics that blacks have adopted now, that this is some unifying strength that they supposedly have, but to most people it means, so you're willing to burn stuff up and terrorize it and try to pretend that's actually a mostly peaceful protest and over a guy that took so much fentanyl it'd kill a horse. Let's continue.
They just simply write off the Greeks' history as mythology, but this simply isn't the case.
Yes, I quite often show that some of the mythology of ancient times, which is said to be written in the stars, is actually working the other way, and they get the story out of the stars. Other times I can show where some of the Greek tales, the Greek gods themselves aren't from a little mountain right there. They talk about Olympus, but it's actually from all kinds of gods from people around there, intertwined into their pantheon that they have of 12 special gods, which goes back to the Sumerians and other people. There are connections between all of these Mediterranean people. What there is no connection to is really any Nubians or any sub-Saharans, and what there's really, really definitely no connection to and no one knew they existed are the far west sub-Saharan Bantus. And if you'll pay attention, they seem to be the ones always claiming this stuff, even when the locals will tell them no, Or even when the Horner people will tell them, quit saying we and pointing at us. It's gotten pretty out of hand, and by pretty out of hand, I mean, have you seen the Cleopatra idea that they wanted to shove out as a documentary? Yeah, see this zodiac and these 12 forms here in 12 hours a day and 360 degrees in a circle and in our globe and all that. That all comes from these ancient Caucasians that heralded civilization. Sometimes people can't handle the truth. It's amazing how meek of a people we are, rather than trying to strut around and show it off all the time. It's just there. And in fact, most people don't know it. In a modern day of pandering, it's gotten to be a buzzword to try to say white superiority. Like, why don't you take the edge off of it? Like Coke tried to pull the idea of be less white. Maybe that'll help society if you were to be a little less white.
Our historical records were recorded in the ancient lore.
No, their historical records. You're not actually involved at all. And you don't have any historical records because you didn't have any writing or anything. Don't try to pull the ancient library of Timbuktu or anything else that was created by Islamics and waylaid after all these other things that happened.
Note, in these stories, the Egyptians told the Greeks that the Greeks were ignorant of their true origin, stating that they were the leftovers of the most noblest and most perfect race amongst men.
Yes, these were the Aryans, and it actually hooked up to the concept of Atlantis, which leads back to the end of the last ice age and the Younger Dryas event. And it appears that it's a mythology that's been taken, perhaps he used the model of the new city of Carthage that was created in its bay, along with Santorini and its ringed appearance, and dreamed of how advanced the Minoans were when they had bathrooms and things like that, all before us, all before the Mycenaean people, all before some of these others around here, and that had gone pretty much in a day and a night. But one thing that it didn't have anything to do with was primitives of West Sub-Sahara. It's pathetic to have to even make that statement, but wow. Here we are, people. So yeah, it tells you in Timaeus, that they've lost the fact that they're the noblest and most perfect race among men, were born in the land where you dwell now, and from them both you yourself are sprung, and the whole of your existing city out of some little seed that chanced to be left over. And this is the reality of Atlantis, and this is the reality of Aryans that went through and became the nobility of quite a few people, and in reality helped start off their civilization, and it happened in waves. And a lot of it's connected, but not all, to the Yamnaya people. And it goes way, way back, and people have been saying things for years, but now that we found the site at Göbekli Tepe, and now we found like 14 others around it, which would show you there was a great empire right in this area at that same time, but it had just been covered up under little mounds and buried. And it's all Stonehenge rings with carved animals on them and everything. It blows away all archaeology, because they came up with the idea, well, we'd have to have pottery and this, that, and the other, and make a city, and then they could finally settle down, and some people would do this, that, and the other. And now they've stumbled over themselves trying to say that there's no civilization going on here, that they were still hunter-gatherers, and now they have to reevaluate what hunter-gatherers are capable of, rather than realizing, I look around and it looks like they could have been farming all over this place. What was the weather like at this time? Oh, wow. Looks like there's a lot of possibilities here, but you want to write it off so bad that you'll turn around and say, Well, I guess we got to reevaluate what hunter-gatherers are capable of.
Who were born in Greece. So Plato, in his book Timaeus, verifies that the Greeks are the descendants of the ancient peoples of Athens, Greece.
Look at this comic mock-up of a Bantu type person wearing a toga. The hell is he? And he's quite admixed here and got a beard, because you got to throw a beard on it like the Greeks. The hell is this?
Strabo, the renowned Greek historian, in his historical work Geographica, says that Greece was a Moorish colony and that their tribal names, like Dremis, Cothis, Codrus, and many more, were Moorish names.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah, that's hilarious. Look at these pictures you're coming up with. All of a sudden, Strabo Negro here going. In the ancient times, the whole of Greece was a settlement of barbarians. That's what it said in Greek old lore and everything. The barbarian origin is some indicated their names. Well, that's because of the ancient Berbers. And they get that name, which has to do with it's conflagrated out of barbarian. But those people are the Amazigh. And it's another showing of the Amazon type of people. And the ancient Berbers were Caucasians. And when you look at the Moors and the true Moors and all of their Alhambra artwork and stuff showing you who they are, playing chess and doing all that, they sure have a lot more red and blonde hair than you'd be willing to believe. And believe it or not, you can Google image it or DuckDuckGo right now and look, try to put in redhead or blonde head Amazigh, and you'll see who the ancient Moors were at the time that eventually entered Spain. I only go that into enough depth because this guy calls himself the New Moors. Well, no, there are no Moors anymore. So you keep trying to pull everybody else's stuff. I'm a gangster now. Oh, that's from the 1920s. We're over with that. Now, where you got to keep doing that? I like that Michael Jackson video. So, we was Strabo. Now, here's the thing too. Is it possible that the Greeks and some of the ancient people of Caucasians in North Africa, which all these people are Caucasian, we're talking about, of course, around the Mediterranean, which means Middle Earth to the people that named it. We also named Africa, or they named Africa. Before that, it was all called Libya. So you look at the Egyptians' depiction of Libyans and you'll see what it all used to be like. There were no black people there. Chief X is famous for putting out $100 bid. If you could just tell him an African colony that was endemic to North Africa, a sub-Saharan African colony, in any way, shape, or form, can you do it? And after offering it to all these Afrocentrics, they tried and failed. Nobody really wants to take the challenge. It's hilariously sad, but we've stepped way the hell out of our West Sub-Saharan Congo boundaries with this we was Strabo.
Which also verified the Greeks were indeed Moors, even stating that the Greeks of his own time period were in fact Moors, naming the Greeks Macedonians, Thracians, Aetolians, i.e. the Turks, and many more, as not just Moors, but calling them the Aperiodic tribes.
You know what's strange about that is that what we're actually talking about then, with those hair colors and all those things, is actually Proto-Indo-Europeans, like the Yamnaya culture, and even in Herodotus's times and all these guys that you're trying to pull off as black, they talk about them being blonde and red-headed and all this stuff. But, you know, that wasn't unique because there are blondes and redheads all over the Middle East at this time. including a lot of Egyptian pharaohs. Well, even the pre-dynastic actually has blonde-haired Ghibelline mummies. They even called it ginger for a while. Now they're going to take that name off because of sensitivity. But Khufu's granddaughter is shown as a redhead. There's a lot of blondes and redheads. King Tut's grandparents, Thuya and Yuya, are both blondes. Of course, now that we've gotten his DNA back and it's R1b, and it shows it's concentrated in Western Europe, a lot of it up in the Isles of Scotland and Ireland and the coast there, and then you look at all the blonde-haired people that are mixed in there, and maybe you can put two and two together. One thing that you can't do is turn around and go, well, wouldn't it be sad that blacks are trying to call themselves barbaric? Well, I get in reality at this time they were a pre-Neolithic people. Seriously. So they were also unknown. We might look at Herodotus' map and you'll realize they don't even know sub-Saharan Africa exists.
Note, neither Plato nor Strabo used the name more directly. Rather, they used the name barbarian.
And I knew that when he was trying it before, that they were the barbarous people. Well, you know what this has to do with? You ever heard of a barber where they cut hair? Well, they also cut beards too. You've seen it, old westerns, everything, the old school way, all that. Yeah. So they were that, but they were also the guys that did medicine and doctors and everything at the same time. In fact, that's where the red and white pole comes from and the idea. But barbarian really meant to the Greeks, because they were the lingua franca of the time, that if you didn't speak Greek, they referred to these people as a barbarian. We've looked at a few in other videos that they called them a barbarian, and you know that they're extremely civilized and doing great, but they called them that. Well, why? Well, it's because they wouldn't learn Greek to speak with us.
Which, according to Plato, were the people of Atlas and Atlantis. While according to Strabo, barbarian referred only to the people of Atlas as.
So now we're seeing a Herodotus' map, which over on the left, it's just slightly cut out. It says, "Watch my America is Atlantis video for better understanding." And he's going to try to claim that they were the Olmecs and they were something else. But of course, this is just almost deflect off the other when we find out, well, before Columbus came, and Leif Erikson came and all that, and actually all the dogs and even South America are from Norwegian and people that have to do with the Danes and stuff, and therefore, wow, there was more interaction. It really validates a lot of those artifacts. Sure, some may be fakes, and we probably need to go through them again, but in reality, a lot of those artifacts that show like Phoenician writing and things like that show that they were here a long time before. There's even an old Phoenician trawler full of urns and everything off the coast of Brazil that they found, and their best thing to pull off is to say, well, the boat got loose from the mooring in a storm, and it went around and around and out the pillars of Hercules, and shoo, it threw it right over. Yeah, it's funny. There's been people who have taken a simple reed boat, like the Sumerians used to have, and Egyptians, and taken that and gone right across and come to the Americas, kind of showing you that it could have happened a long time before. I showed a recent video where one of these islands that are right up in here, that's way off the coast though, and impossible to swim to, is showing Cro-Magnon people and some Neanderthal people there, showing you that boating goes back about 160, 200,000 BC, some way to navigation that these people could have possibly gone across there. I think that's just hilariously amazing. But look at this map. Do you see sub-Saharan Africa? No. It's all called Libya. See the word right there? And he's going to tell you in a minute this only contains the idea of Egypt. And if you'll look here, they think it all runs out of these mountains here and it stops. But if you look at another video, they took it around here and they go all the way up and they put the tip of it into the Atlas Mountains. God, go right there. And that's where the Nile comes from, because nobody knew before, Dr. Livingston, I presume, and so on. You'll also find that if you look in the far right-hand side where it says Germania, that there's no bottom to India that's there either, because they're not referring to anything but the Caucasian area of the world that's all through here. Other maps will show blotches on it that are brown, that are all over the place, seemingly at the end of every river on the map. And you wonder what that is about. And, that's Ethiopians. Yeah, I recently did a video about that where Fortress of Lu is explaining it, because blacks have been trying to pull this "we was Cleopatra" crap, and he said, shots fired on history, huh? Well, here's one that everybody knows, but nobody talks about, that Memnon and Ethiopia had nothing to do with the place that's called Ethiopia today. That's Herodotus and past. Isn't that amazing?
Atlantis during his time was thought to be underwater, as confirmed by Strabo's map, which omits Atlantis and every part of Africa below Morocco and Egypt.
Well, he admits it. There's no sub-Saharan even shown on the map. You can tell this is a black guy, and of course he's the new Moors, and the Greeks were black. Nobody else would even be trying to pull this off and end up being the clowns on the world stage that they want to try to pull off. Now, if you look at that other map, maybe we ought to do that right now. You see how this kind of looks? We're going to see a different map here, but you see how India doesn't have its point on it either, but they even know about some of the islands here and stuff, and the Red Sea and the way it looks, everything. You got that right? Well, let's take a look. I just look up Herodotus' map, and it'll show a bunch of variations, but you can tell they all look like a velociraptor skull or something facing to the left because of the Mediterranean where it comes out, and that makes it like a mouth, right? Well, this is the one I want to talk about first, because in this version, every brown splotch in ancient Greek folklore is named Ethiopians, and that's odd. But then whenever you go back any time before that, they're only living in the far east and the far west, because it's where the sun comes up and the sun sets, and it says it straight out. Got a video about it, but it never had anything to do with the area now called Ethiopia, and that's after Herodotus. But before that time, these are all the places known, and you'll see they go to different river situations. And of course that having to do with agriculture, and what we're really talking about is tanned farmers. Well, he called them melanocroes. Yeah, that means tanned skin. At this time, nobility are able to keep themselves out of the sun and so on and else, but they call the Syrians melanocroes and these other people, and just like on that map, you look right where the Caucasus Mountains are, and it says it right there that that's supposed to be where some Ethiopians are. Well, it's the people of the Golden Fleece and stuff like that, which later are talked about as being the Colchians. But of course, one was mythology, the other one was I'm walking into the people right now, and doesn't seem to be exactly what we've been saying with mythology, because it's mythology. So some of these maps show different ways and colors and stuff, and I guess that's all neat. Ooh, let's pick out this one with the bright colors. And if we look, the Nile goes up, but doesn't even go to sub-Saharan Africa. There is no sub-Saharan Africa, and the Nile actually comes from the Atlas Mountains, but right before it gets there, it says Atlantis, and that's right where that Eye of Atlantis is. Yeah, so it's believed that a lot of people had connections to that too, but really, if you take everything that they say for for reality. The only thing that makes any sense is a mid-sea rising that whenever, at the time of this, during the driest event, the water would have been so low that the center of the ocean there and the ridge, the mid-continental ridge, would be real close to the surface. And so if it did fall at the time or something else, blah, blah, blah. But the islands before and then the islands and the bigger beyond would actually end up being America. And it's strange if it just came out of them, like nobody really knew it. But where did this story come from? Well, if you track it down, it looks like this and a lot of maritime stories were coming from the ancient Phoenicians. And a lot of it was just BS, where they drew dragons out in the water in certain places. And if you went there, you'd be like, oh, here's these islands, and those people are coming out. And they seem kind of strange towards us. Why? Because they think you're the Phoenicians, and then they realize, hey, this is kind of funny, and you don't have the same flag on. You have to have the right flag. Anybody that went out the Pillar of Hercules there on the left and didn't have certain flags going didn't make it back in.
Referred only to the people of Atlas, as Atlantis during his time was thought to be underwater, as confirmed by Strabo's map, which omits Atlantis and every part of Africa below Morocco and Egypt.
Oops.
Plato and Strabo both confirm that Atlas is the Greeks' name for Northwest Africa, but Strabo made the true identity of the barbarians irrefutable when he stated that the Greeks referred to the people of Northwest Africa as Mauritanians, but made it even more impossible to ever argue by making it clear that the people of Northwest Africa called themselves Maori.
No, actually, it's just over there in the corner. And we have a bunch of Carthaginian settlements too, but that again is the Phoenicians also, isn't it? And this has nothing to do with black people. They didn't have any settlements or know they even that any of this existed. They were living pretty much by themselves like a land of the lost in the Congo area, and have no attachments whatsoever. And it's quite pathetic. They make this art, they make all these things up. They pick and choose things to say, and whenever you find other stuff that goes against it, they'll try to call you a racist. They think it's a special word they have.
Maori was the name of the people of Northwest Africa, whom
just the Romans even called themselves Maori whenever they were down there. What's that? Yeah, it's just the area. It was in Mauritius, so now they were Eurasians. You know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. It's like when people went to Egypt, quite often they'd be doing the Egyptian thing and dance like an Egyptian. Berbers, see Maori. So the ancient Berbers, these Caucasians with blue and green eyes and blonde hair, red hair, not all, but they're all Caucasians. And there are still pockets of it in North Africa to this day.
Romans referred to as Maori as well, but according to the Oxford's Byzantine Dictionary, they acknowledge that the word Maori is not only another word for barbarian, but that the Maori are indeed the Moors.